Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Bloomington, Monroe County, the League of Women Voters of Brown County, and the Greater Bloomington Chamber of Commerce, welcome to the third of the 2021 legislative updates and the first at which we are welcoming Brown County as a co-sponsor. My name is Ann Birch. I am president of the Bloomington Monroe County League, and I will be moderating this session. Mary Morgan is the Director of Advocacy and Public Policy from the Chamber. Sherry Frank is the president of the Brown County League, and Ralph Shaw, co-chair of our Voter Service Committee, is our question moderator. This morning, our local legislators will report on their work and priorities for the current session of the Indiana General Assembly. They will each have up to 10 minutes. After that, we will welcome questions from the audience. At any time during the session, you can alert the question moderator on chat if you have a question, and she will put you in the queue. You will be recognized in the order in which you submit your question, and you will be asked to unmute and turn on your video when it is your turn. Please do not use chat for conversations, as this distracts all of us from the purpose of this program. Please limit your question to 1 minute. Our timer will give a little chime when 10 seconds are left. If you have additional questions, please hold them in reserve. After everyone with a question has had the opportunity to ask it, additional questions will be allowed, but only if time remains. Posing a question constitutes your permission to be recorded by Community Access TV. This morning is intended to be an informative session, an opportunity to get an update from our legislators. It is not a time to make public statements or to engage in debate. Please frame your questions to elicit information for the benefit of all of us. You may agree or disagree with comments, but we ask you to be respectful. For our legislators, each of you will have an opportunity to answer a question and will have about 2 to 3 minutes to answer. I'll call on you in rotation, so it's not always the same person who has to answer first. Okay, we will begin. Would our legislators please start their videos? This morning with us today, we have Representative Matt Pierce, representing the 61st District, and Senator Shelley Yoder, representing the 40th Senate District. Senator Yoder, would you begin with your 10-minute summary?
Thank you so much to the League of Women Voters, and it's exciting that we expanded to Brown County. This morning, as I was reflecting on our halfway point in this year's session, I was thinking about real positives. I was trying to remain positive because it can be a very depressing place at times, but I was trying to remain positive and focus on those bills that I feel haven't gotten much attention, but are still quite a good step forward for Indiana and are heading over to the House for additional conversation. The Senate delivered bills to the House. If you take a look at Senate Bill 2, that is a bill that is going to fully fund our public education system for this year, for those schools that did begin the school year or continued the school year virtually due to the pandemic. So that's Senate Bill 2. Senate Bill 220 increases Indiana's workers' compensation schedule, which hasn't happened in too many years. And this year, we've sent over to the House a bill that will increase that schedule that will both help workers, Indiana workers, recover from any accidents, but it also protects businesses from lawsuits when employees are hurt on the job. Senate Bill 368, we made some progress in juvenile justice reform. This bill provides the automatic expungement of certain juvenile offenses. It prevents juveniles from being housed with adult offenders while awaiting trial. And it also sets up procedures for determining competency. Senate Bill 373, I feel like I need to give a big shout out to my predecessor, Mark Stoops, who worked tirelessly on this bill. It's a Carbon Credits Bill, and he first introduced this bill in 2016. And this year we are sending it over to the House. This program provides an economically smart way to reduce our carbon footprint while also increasing better air quality and cleaner water. And it also provides a mechanism to fund some of Indiana's conservation programs. Things I continue to be concerned about, there are a number of bills that really suppress voter access. And one of those is Senate Bill 353 that reduces vote by mail and also increases voter ID laws. So that bill I continue to be concerned about. Senate Bills 413 and even the worst bill, which is the House Bill 1005, expands vouchers and introduces again an education savings account program to fund private education and charter schools that lack transparency, accountability, and anti-discrimination clauses that are required from our traditional public schools. And Senate Bill 389 that will deregulate the remaining, some of Indiana's remaining isolated wetlands. I also think that it's important to point out that legislators took part in this past week in a mandatory anti-harassment and ethics training. Chapter 3, Section 1 of the House Code of Ethics states the House is committed to providing a work environment in which all employees are treated with respect and free from harassment based on sex, race, color, religion, national origin, veteran status, age, or disability. And in keeping with this commitment, the House strictly prohibits harassment in any form. Now, the Senate has, I'm in the Senate, and the Senate has a very comparable language in code as well. But I pointed out to the House language because unfortunately, harassment based on race did occur in the House, and which I have been told. But what we learned in that training, and I want to reiterate this, whether you witness it, you do it, or you hear about it, we are and must be compelled to do something. And I have submitted a letter to leadership, copying the governor and the leader in the Senate, asking that something be done on this. And I also support in this letter the request made by the Indiana Black Legislative Caucus that 3 things happen. One, that they schedule and mandate racial equity and implicit bias training. I also support that in this next interim, Senator Randolph has proposed that all of Indiana's laws be looked at and identified for those Jim Crow era laws and criminal penalties that still continue to exist in Indiana code, and some recommendations be made in repealing those laws. And finally, I support forming a partnership between the General Assembly and the state's Chief Equity, Inclusion, and Opportunity Officer that was instated by the governor this year. Her name is Chief Officer Kara Herring, and part of her role as defined by the governor is to drive cultural change across government workplaces and improve government operations for all Hoosiers. Conversations around race can be difficult, and I am certain that she can be helpful to the legislature to improve our workplace culture. With her experience, Chief Officer Herring can work with legislators to foster better understanding, respect, and trust in areas of diversity, inclusion, and justice. And with that, I will pass it over to the next legislator who is ready to speak. But I thank you for having me this morning and an opportunity to have a conversation with constituents.
Thank you, Senator Yoder. Representative Pierce, would you like to begin your summary?
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. I think I'll start out by addressing the issue that Senator Yoder was just talking about with this kind of outburst in the House, which was pretty shocking. It's really hard to know what to say about the whole thing, but just to give you a little bit of background, I mean, the thing that's kind of most interesting to me about it is the bill that was being debated dealt with the South Bend schools, and essentially it was designed to allow a predominantly white township to be able to essentially move from the South Bend school system, which is 60% African American, into another nearby school district, which is predominantly white. The argument of the proponents of that bill was that it had nothing to do about race. You just had people who felt the transportation was better to the other district, and it was offering some courses on agriculture that those students wanted to take. But the fact of the matter is that once you would transition through that process, what you would essentially doing is you would be taking money away from a predominantly African-American district and transferring it to a predominantly white school district. And so the Black Caucus members were really just pointing out the fact that this really harkens back to, earlier issues, including the fact that South Bend is still under a consent decree with the courts about, segregation in their system. So, they were just pointing out, the obvious, this bill could have discriminatory and racist impacts. And when that was brought up, there were some people in the chamber who just kind of went nuts, and just you had kind of like this minor explosion of, I don't know if jeering is the right term, but people just, you could tell that the members of the Republican caucus were really outraged that anyone would suggest that they have any discriminatory or racist motives, and it was just all downhill from there. So the question is, how do you think of that? I think the speaker is thinking of this event as just a momentary breakdown in civility and House rules, and everything is designed to ensure that you can have robust discussion of the issues without getting into people's motives and having all kinds of, personal attacks and things. And so, if you think of it as just a momentary breakdown in civility, then there's kind of one solution to that, which the speaker's solution is, I'm just going to enforce the rules more carefully about behavior on the House floor. I think that the problem is it really shows a greater issue. And that's a big difference, I think, between the two parties is I think a lot of people, maybe a majority of people on the Republican side, just don't think systemic racism exists in our society. So, if you don't think you have a problem, then you can't find a solution for it. And so if indeed that event was a symptom of a greater issue in our society, which we need to cope with and we need to get out in the open and talk about, then we got a lot more to do. If you think it was just a, momentary lapse in civility because people were cranky or tired or, just didn't like what they heard or whatever, then you get a different answer. So it remains to be seen how that will play out. Our caucus has been supporting the Black Caucus and all of its efforts. Our leadership, full leadership's met with the speaker about this. And, we've really said we should have some implicit bias training and start kind of dealing with some of these issues. But I have a suspicion that that's not going to happen. I think the Republican caucus would just like to get this event behind them as quickly as possible. Okay, let me talk about the budget and a few other issues. So the budget's passed the House. It's now over in the Senate. The Senate will probably rewrite it significantly. That usually happens. And then ultimately the budget's going to get decided in a conference committee at the end of session. And one of the things that will really depend upon how it comes out is what the final budget forecast is, revenue forecast. At the very end of April, we get kind of an update on whether we're going to have more money or less money based on predictions of what the economy is going to do. And if it's a good positive, hey, we're going to have more money than we thought, then there's usually room to add things to the budget. If they say, oh, it looks like it's going to be worse than we thought, then perhaps money starts coming out. My frustration with the budget is, despite hearing a lot of branding about aiming higher and getting to the next level, our budgets are pretty consistently just about mediocrity. It's really just about maintaining the status quo, keeping the wheels of government grinding, and it doesn't really attack the significant problems that our state is facing. And so just, a few examples of things that are going on in this budget. Arts funding is cut, at a time when, just like the hospitality industry, our arts industry, which it is an industry, it has an economic impact. It does more than just nurture the soul. It actually is part of our economy, particularly in Bloomington. So at a time when arts venues could use probably more help, they're likely going to have less help because their mental health was cut at a time when we have significant mental health problems. The Choice program, which is designed to help seniors stay in their homes instead of having to go to a nursing home, that was cut by $10 million. Funding for local health departments at a time when we're hitting a pandemic, at a time when it's becoming blatantly clear how many significant health issues we have among our population, whether it's obesity, smoking, heart disease, you name it. We're kind of at the top of the list for having those issues. Despite all that, Funding for our local health departments continues to be frozen at its ever level of $3 million. There's no funding at all for doulas. These are people who assist pregnant women and new mothers and help try to combat things that cause infant mortality, maternal health problems, and just like no money, not a penny for it, right? Despite the fact that we know we have problems with maternal and infant health and deaths. It's just not a good situation. Food banks, frozen, $300,000. Same old funding, $300,000 at a time when we are facing food insecurity at a level never seen before. Now, my Republican friends on the other side of the aisle will say, well, the problem is you Democrats, you're just big spenders. You don't realize we have to balance a budget and have fiscal responsibility. And, if we had it your way, we'd all be bankrupt. Well, it's just not the case. First of all, we have a $2 billion surplus. We're in an economic crisis. It wouldn't hurt to use a little more of the surplus right now. Okay, but let's just say we leave the surplus alone because that's like inviolate. You can't touch it. At the same time, those programs were cut that I just talked to you about. There's $50 million going to be spent to build a swine barn at the state fair, which they've now renamed the Fall Creek Pavilion to make it sound a little more appealing. That's a one-time cost. But vouchers for private schools and these educational savings accounts to get tax dollars into the hands of private schools, that's going to increase $66 million. Virtual charter schools, which we've had a whole string of scandals, basically, with our virtual charter schools, real problems, issues of accountability. We've done really nothing to address that, but we've decided that virtual charter schools now deserve 100% funding, and that's going to be an additional $28 million. And, it seems kind of odd to me because the virtual charter schools, when they showed up on the scene several years ago, said, hey, we can do this more cheaply. We're going to do it virtually. We don't need to have all these bricks and mortar buildings and all the expenses that come along with maintaining infrastructure. And so the legislature said, okay, we'll pay you. I think it was 85% at one point, then up to 90. Now it's going to 100. So the point is, it's really not a matter of, are we going to spend more money than we have? It's a matter of how are we going to spend the money we do have? And I just don't think we're doing a very good job in that regard. But we'll see what the Senate does and what comes out of conference committee at the end. Okay, a few other bills that are of interest. You might have heard that Senate Bill 148 from last session, which was vetoed by the governor, deals with landlord-tenant ordinances in local communities. That was overridden by the legislature, so that is now the law of the state. I opposed that bill last year and opposed overturning the governor's veto this year because I think that the bill is just way tilted in the favor of landlords in a way that are going to have negative impacts on tenants. There is what they call a trailer bill, House Bill 1541, which is designed to fix the most egregious problem with the bill in that it says that a local unit of government can't have any ordinance affecting the landlord-tenant relationship, which is such a huge description that I think it would pretty much keep local units from doing about anything. And so the governor pointed that out in his veto message. That was one reason he vetoed the bill. So I think they're fixing that so they appear to be responsive to what the governor had to say about the bill. The problem is there's a lot more that needs to get fixed in that bill. One thing that really worries tenant advocates is there's something called an emergency possessory order. And this is designed for situations where you have a tenant who's like literally destroying the property or something really negative is going on. And if you don't get them out of the unit in a hurry, there's going to be waste, there's going to be damage to the landlord. And so you can go in and have this special expedited process to get the tenant out. Well, SB 148's got some language in it that seems to expand the situations in which you can use that expedited eviction process. And so we're going to have to see what the courts do with that. But that's another thing that ought to get fixed. And so, at this point, the legislature has said we're going to be in charge of all the landlord-tenant laws now for the most part, and, locals stay out. So we'll see how that's going to work out. The other thing I forgot to mention on the budget, or we should talk about, also is teacher pay. It's really interesting how going into the election last year, the response was, well, teacher pay is best addressed during the budget session when we can look at the entire big picture of school funding. That's when we'll address it. The governor's commission came out and said you'd need about $600 million to really solve the teacher pay problem. And, we expected at least a little bit of something to get done. I didn't expect a $600 million appropriation for that. But I think it's unfortunate that pretty much nothing's been done on teacher pay. And it's what seems to be coming out of the chairman of Ways and Means Committee is like, well, that's just a local issue. You figure it out, school boards. It looks like I'm out of time because I see Ann has appeared.
Thank you both. Now we're ready for questions from the audience. When you're called upon by the question moderator, please unmute and turn on your video, state your name and ask your 1-minute question. And then I will call on each legislator to respond.
Okay, our first question is from Kyle Hannon. So Kyle, go ahead and unmute and turn on your video and ask your question.
Hi, thank you. Again, I'm Kyle Hannon. So I just finished filling out my tax returns, got them filed, yay. But so when I file my federal taxes, it's free to e-file. But to file, if I were to e-file my state taxes, it costs $20. Now, I mailed it instead, and it, even with tracking, it was less than $5. Why is it that it costs $20? I mean, somebody has to take my tax return, open my tax return, enter all this stuff manually. I think, gosh, why aren't we able to file that for free as well?
Okay, thank you. Representative Pierce, would you like to address this first?
And that's a really good question. I don't know the answer. I suspect that what happened is, several years ago, whenever states started moving to e-filing, probably the Department of Revenue said, okay, we should probably offer that service. How are we going to do it? Well, we better just hire some subcontractor, outsource this somehow, pair with some private entity, and they're probably the ones that are getting that $20 fee. Would be my guess. I don't know that for certain. So I'm going to have to look into that and try to figure out if we can do better on it. Because I agree, in this day and age, it doesn't make any sense to be, charging a premium for doing stuff online.
Okay, thank you. Senator Yoder, would you like to respond?
I would just agree with what Representative Pierce said. And I think that, Kyle, you've given a really good, some good direction on possible legislation to look into this. And so maybe in the coming years, we won't have that fee, but I agree with you. That is, it's to be questioned for sure, but I really don't know why there is that fee. But thanks for bringing it to my attention.
Okay, good luck.
Okay, thank you. Our next question.
Okay, next question is from Mary Morgan. Mary, if you would unmute and turn on your video.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I have this question. I'm sure you're aware of the recent controversy in Bloomington about the homeless encampments. Could you talk about any legislation in play that would address homelessness or local municipalities' efforts to deal with homelessness? Thanks.
Thank you. Senator Yoder, would you address this?
I am aware, and I appreciate your question, Mary. I think this is this is a real concern and a problem that we should continue to have a robust dialogue. It's just sad all around, and I think what is happening in the legislature, we did actually, I thought about including that in one of my, I guess, surprises for the past 6 weeks. One of the bills that we did send over to the House, it's Senator Sandlin authored this bill, and it's more of a right to shelter bill. And it permits for those who are experiencing bouts of homelessness or looking at experience being unhoused, being able to secure funds through townships that they can shelter in their communities, that there is a right to shelter in your own community, because I know that many feel that those resources are not there in maybe in their hometown or in their county or in the areas that they want to live, where they might have family or support, and they have to go elsewhere. And this piece of legislation allows and gives opportunities and a pathway for securing funds for people to be able to shelter in their communities. I'll look up that Senate bill, or if somebody is doing that, you can look up that Senate bill. It is Senator Sandlin, and I'll look that up and put that in the chat. But that's something that's going over to the House and is a positive bill. And I sadly think that's the only bill that's coming out of the Senate.
Thank you. Representative Pierce?
No, there's not much in the House either, but there is an interesting bill which I think that may become something bigger when it gets over to the Senate. Looks like there's kind of a lot of discussion behind the scenes. But House Bill 1095 has a bunch of different things in it that kind of relate to homeless populations. One had Indianapolis, and it's all basically being driven by a legislator from Indianapolis. So it's kind of more from the perspective of the problems that Indianapolis is facing in this regard. But, to be honest with you, I don't think they're that much different than Bloomington, other than perhaps maybe the scale, because Indianapolis is such a larger community. But it deals with what to do when you have kind of squatters and people in abandoned homes, or homes that have not yet been officially declared abandoned, but are considered unsafe by the health authorities. And so, what do you do if people are in unsafe homes? And it also tries to address the issue of, panhandling. How do you constitutionally create some framework so when people are in downtown communities, trying to enjoy an evening, not being kind of bombarded by requests for money or other interactions, which makes them want to come downtown less. So that's an issue that's been out there that people in Indianapolis talk about a lot, and I'm sure it's come up in our community as well. And then part of this bill will create a low barrier homeless task force. Now, it's made up of mostly Marion County people right now, the way it's written. So I'm kind of hoping that maybe when it gets over to the Senate, that might be expanded out a little bit more for an opportunity for other communities that are facing this issue to kind of look into that. That's the only thing that's come out of the House that might kind of morph into something bigger, or at least get the state a little bit more focused on the issue to see what it might do to help out.
Hey, thank you. Our next question.
Okay, the next question is from Pamela Davidson. Pamela, if you will unmute and ask your question.
Good morning, Shelley, Matt. We appreciate you every day. This question was really for the Republicans who, let us know, are not here. I was really obsessed with the Indianapolis attack on home rule issues. Whether it's the rental landlord issues, Matt, you outlined so well, factory farm productions, remember that? Recycling rules, and now what local prosecutors can charge, because they're all in a snid about Indianapolis taking a very reasonable position. We're not going to waste our money on marijuana. How smart. So they're retaliating. I just don't get that. This home rule attack, it used to be a Republican position, no longer. Our statewide issues are so huge. 49th out of 50 states in public health funding. Matt, again, you covered that well. Coal ash ponds. We lead the country. No plan to deal with those. The attack on wetlands is just unbelievable. So we have all these statewide issues: asthma, respiratory issues, COVID, opioids. And again, here they're micromanaging because they've just become such a bully pulpit. This has been the saddest legislative session.
That was the chime saying that your time has expired.
Thank you. Handgun permits.
Okay. Thank you. Representative Pierce, would you like to respond?
Yeah, every year it gets worse and worse with the state preempting specific local ordinances, and those are usually aimed at communities that have governments controlled by Democrats. So here's basically what's happened. Here's why it's kind of gone through the roof. Is now you have a supermajority in the legislature, so they have 2/3. They can essentially do whatever they want without any input from the minority party. So they have maximum power. So if you're a Republican and you live in a place like Indianapolis, and let's say, for example, you're a landlord and you don't like the fact that Indianapolis just passed a landlord-tenant ordinance that you think is not good for you. Well, in the old days, you would have to bring that issue up at the next election or build public support, get your candidates elected, and have them change the ordinance. Well, now all you do, if you're in Marion County, is you walk down the street to the State House and you go to the Republicans who control state government and you say, those horrible Democrats in Marion County just did a bad thing to me with their laws. And would you please fix it? And then they say, yeah, we will gladly preempt and rewrite all the Indianapolis ordinances. And that's why we got Senate Bill 148 on landlord-tenant. And this happens a lot with Bloomington, right? Republican members of the community or office holders who don't like what's happening down here, they go up to Indianapolis and they talk to their Republican legislators and say, please preempt this stuff. And so you end up with, annexation laws written specifically for Bloomington, things about paper bags in the statute about plastic bags where they could be regulated. It's just really an endless list. I mean, the thing about how you vote for these local income taxes, how the voting blocks are going to work. I mean, these are all results of people who are in the minority in their local units, and they come up to where they're in the majority at the state level, and they can basically win the day in the end, even though they can't win elections on the local level. So that's why we have so much preemption.
Thank you. Senator Yoder?
Thank you so much, Pam, for your question. I would say I agree. This is my first session, and what I'm struck by is the three things that stood out through the Senate bills. I was surprised by how many bills we tackled this session, considering all of the issues that you mentioned, Pam, but home rule, taking away home rule and local governance. That one was definitely pervasive. The other that I thought, my goodness, we're dealing with this a lot, is gambling. I mean, I would say there was some sort of a gambling bill almost every week. And when we're dealing with the COVID crisis, economic crises, the promise to teachers on addressing pay, the inequities that we see in communities throughout Indiana, I was just struck by how many bills had to do with gambling, and the other one was policing. This session, I was not supportive of this, but we expanded for hospital security to be able to have policing rights throughout the community. And that is of concerns of increasing policing, questions of funding, who gets to decide how local police departments are funded. And again, that sort of speaks to the home rule and local governance, and limiting that and limiting the voice of the people. Again and again, there were attempts to take away the people that we put in place to represent us in our communities and to squelch those voices. That's what stood out to me, and I share your concern. I know we have another 6 weeks until the end of this session, but those three things really stood out to me as a disproportionate amount of time was spent in discussion. So thanks, Pam, for your question.
Thank you. Could we have our next question, please?
Okay, the next question is from Georgianne Catlona.
Hi, everyone. Since we're on the theme of local government and housing, I wondered if either of you could explain Senate Bill 214 on low-income housing. It's now means. It's a bill that I have trouble understanding exactly what it's doing, but I noticed that it has had bipartisan support. So I wondered if it was a glimmer of hope in addressing some issues for low-income housing and developers.
Thank you. Senator Yoder, would you like to respond first?
Sure, thank you. I am just noting at the brightness behind both Georgianne and Pam's backgrounds, lots of green plants and bright sunshine. That's nice around this time of year. It's good to see. So Senate Bill 214, just had to remind myself, this was a low-income housing bill. that really repealed something that happened in 2016 regarding the eligibility of property tax exemptions for improvements on property that are constructed and rehabilitated to for the purposes of affordable or low income housing. So this was a bill that fixed a bill that one of those unintended consequences of things that we see coming out of the legislature, these ideas that end up harming communities. So this bill was attempting to fix that, but it was attempting to fix a bill that passed in 2016.
Okay, thank you. Representative Pierce?
I've not had a chance to read that bill. I looked, it's pending in the Ways and Means Committee. And so Representative Leonard is the House sponsor. And so I don't know if that bill will move independently. A lot of times, if that's considered kind of more of a technical correction on some previous bill, a lot of times they just get stuck into like a bigger bill, which has a whole bunch of different provisions to kind of make things more efficient. So we'll just have to see what, if anything, happens with that bill. But it's in the Ways and Means Committee right now in the House.
Okay, thank you. Our next question, please.
Okay, so the next question is from Kathy Roundtree.
Hi, good morning. Thank you guys so much for being here. I just wondered what you think is the best strategy to approach fair redistricting this cycle. It seems that so many of the things that you're discussing are a result, as you said, of the supermajority that came into effect with the last redistricting. What suggestions do you have to local communities to bring this to light and to improve the chances this year?
Yeah, thank you. Representative Pierce, would you like to address this first?
Yeah, this is a really tough issue. I don't know how we break through, but we keep working at it. The thing that's interesting about this year is because the census got pretty messed up along the way over the last year, the census people have now said that the states will not get the information needed to redraw our legislative and congressional districts until the end of September. So what that means is the real kind of map decisions are going to get made probably in October and maybe November. So to me, that gives us lots of time, and this is going to be my message, and we'll probably begin trying to offer some amendments in the House to try to accomplish this, but we should go ahead and set up a nonpartisan redistricting committee. They got plenty of time now. They got all summer to get ready for it into the fall. And then we could have them do their work and present a bill that's not driven by politics. But the reason why it's so difficult is, hey, if you've got absolute power, you don't want to give up that absolute power. And if you know that one of the keys to your absolute power is that you got to tailor make each district to maximize your chances of winning, you're just not going to give that up easily. So you're going to, the biggest problem is how do you really get the public engaged on this issue? I know there are people in my district who care very much about it. I hear from them a lot about it. But I think that if you went around across the state, a lot of people just say like, well, that's just a bunch of political, whatever, people fighting amongst themselves as politicians. What do I care? Maybe if you're a Republican, maybe you like the fact that absolute power settles in the Republican Party if that's your team. So maybe you're not interested in changing it. So I don't know what lever we can find to make the people in power now decide that we should have a fairer system, but we just got to keep trying.
Okay, thank you. Senator Yoder?
Thank you, Kathy. I appreciate that question. So Matt really explained well the frustration about this, but I want to take it a step further and say, because we are not going to get those numbers back, and now they're saying it could be October before the lines are redrawn. What does that do to even our elections and the democratic process with people running for different offices? I've run for a lot of them, and I've run for some that don't take a lot of money, and I've run for some that take a lot of money and exposure and messaging and travel and getting your message to the people so that they know they have a choice in the election. And you're looking at this the end of this year not even knowing what's going to happen for our next election cycle for 2022. So the problem is even more concerning than gerrymandering or fair redistricting. It is knowing that people won't even be able to run for office, have a choice in elections that keep our democracy alive and well. And I do want to point to, maybe someone can put into the chat that there is a redistricting community conversation for the current Congressional District 9. That happens on Wednesday, this coming Wednesday, over Zoom from 7 to 8 p.m. Maybe someone could put that in the chat on how you can register for that conversation. But these conversations are happening throughout Indiana in every single congressional district. And ours for Senate District 9 is happening this coming Wednesday from 7 to 8.
Okay, thank you. I will just mention about the meeting that Senator Yoder was referring to is we will have a follow-up email to everyone who is attending this session, and there will be information about those citizen redistricting groups in that email. So that will be helpful. Thank you. Our next question, please.
The next question is from James and Tommy Allison.
I can't start the video. It's been stopped.
Just go ahead and read.
But I'll just go ahead and read the question. Later this year, the public can draw their very own district election maps for Indiana's next elections to Congress and to the state legislature, both houses. And the League has joined several other organizations to provide easy internet access to the necessary information and software. Prizes will go to the best maps, which of course can be compared with the 3 official maps drawn up by the state legislature. What do you think of this project?
Thank you. Senator Yoder, would you like to address that first?
Anything that engages citizenry is one that keeps our democracy alive and well. And I'm curious about, I think everybody's curious about what are the prizes in this, but I think it's just an important part of this whole process that it starts at a very granular level. And if, as Representative Pierce pointed out, if you travel throughout the state, we are fortunate we live in a community that people really care about districting and redistricting and issues of gerrymandering and fair districts. And the more people who are involved in that conversation, the better. And we're fortunate here. So I say, I think it's great. I hope to participate in as well. I want to see those, all of the options that people put forward. And I hope that whoever wins or comes up with a district, a plan, that those voices are listened to and taken into consideration. So thanks for your ingenuity and innovation.
Thank you. Representative Pierce?
Yeah, I think it's really important for people to be involved in this process, and I think that we should go beyond awarding prizes. I personally am interested in introducing on the floor of the House these nonpartisan maps that were drawn. So I know the League of Women Voters, they've been in league with other civic organizations around the state to put together a nonpartisan or a tripartisan commission, however you look at it. And I think that they should draw what they think are the best maps for the state. And I'd like to see them put on the House floor, and the members of the House and the Senate can choose whether they want the political maps that were drawn by their people or whether they want nonpartisan maps drawn by the people.
Thank you. Our next question.
Okay, the next question is a second question from Georgianne.
Yes, I'd like to follow up on the local issue and housing. House Bill 1337, which has now gone to the Senate Committee on Local Government, that's the planning and zoning one. Representative Pierce, you had voted against that on the floor along with a significant number of other legislators. Can you talk about that? Because when I read that bill, it looks to me like it takes away a great deal of local control over zoning, and that seems concerning to me. So, thank you.
Thank you. Representative Pierce, would you address that first?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure 1337 is Representative Hostetler's bill, which deals with how you appeal planning and zoning decisions. I hope I'm keeping on the right bill here. The issue with that bill, the reason why I opposed it is essentially what Representative Hostetler feels is that, you know, if you need a variance or you want to appeal some planning and zoning issue, you go to the Board of Zoning Appeals. And the BZA, which is appointed citizens, it operates much like a court. It's kind of like a judicial process, and there are limitations on who they can talk to. It's not a normal like city council process where you lobby your legislator and legislators or city council people can consider, you know, all kinds of political things that they want. They're welcome to do that. But the BZA is supposed to act more like a judge and only make decisions based on kind of more formal facts entered into at the hearing, and without this kind of outside influence. And so to me, that's the better process, because you're going to get a more objective, I think, fair assessment among the competing parties about, you know, what is the law on planning and zoning, or is the variance really justified? Representative Hostetler wants to put that in the hands of the elected bodies, which, you know, sounds good in the abstract. Hey, what more democracy? What could be wrong with that? But I think that what that does is that opens the door for a lot of political influence to be used to win votes in political bodies, you know, to get your project approved or to override what the planning and zoning people thinks. That's the reason why I was opposed to that bill.
Thank you. Senator Yoder, do you have a response?
Thank you so much. I think this is just another example of trying to take the voice and the power away from local communities and putting it in the legislature. And I would agree with what Representative Pierce had to say. I've not seen that bill. It has not come over, it hasn't been read, it hasn't been heard in the Senate. So I'll take another look at it, but I would agree with what Representative Pierce said and the discussion that took place over in the House.
Yeah, thank you. Our next question.
Our next question actually is one that was posed before the meeting began. It says, given the recent controversy in Bloomington about homeless and, well, I guess that's a repeat of the question that was already asked by Mary Morgan. So I don't have any other questions from anybody who has notified me that they were planning to ask questions.
Okay, we have a couple of additional questions here, kind of general questions that we can explore. One is just in general, how is the legislature acting at this point in regards to Hoosiers' access to health care? And Senator Yoder, could you address that?
Hoosiers' access to health care. One of the ways that I hope is an improvement for Hoosiers is we have expanded telemedicine for Indiana, and sort of we're rethinking it and expanding it. I think the pandemic has taught us that telehealth has been a good thing, and ways that we can continue to engage telehealth to improve health outcomes for Hoosiers. What I have, I'm excited about that. What I'm concerned about is there are other bills that have been introduced to put some limits to reproductive justice on accessing telehealth. And I'm always concerned about how language around reproductive justice gets put onto bills. We saw a very good bill in health and in education, expanding Medicare in the public school system. That for every dollar we spend, we get back from the federal government and Medicaid expenses $2. And so why wouldn't we be expanding the kind of care that students can get through Medicaid services? And even in that bill, language was put into that bill around reproductive justice. So I see what I'm beginning to feel in the General Assembly, where we take a positive step forward, and then just amendments are made that really take us backwards. So in accessing health, I think telehealth is good, increasing health, but we need to be really mindful of how we expand and put our value in making sure that everyone in Indiana has access to the internet, because if we're going to have telehealth, we need to make sure that everyone has access to broadband or to the internet. We also need to make sure that education, when it comes to accessing and using the devices that will be approved, or the platforms that will be approved when it comes to telehealth, are expanded and used throughout Indiana, so people know how to use telehealth, as well as the health devices that we will say are approved devices to be able to use. We need to make sure that they can get into the hands of people, because in states where telehealth has been expanded, there hasn't been that closing of the gap in racial disparities. And we can point to those issues: access and affordability of the internet, use of devices and understanding how to use those devices and access to those devices, as well as education on using the technology or the applications of telehealth itself. So as long as we can do all of those together, I think telehealth will be a positive step forward in improving access to care in the state of Indiana.
Yeah, thank you. Representative Pierce?
Well, if the question is about, what is the legislature doing to address the big problem that's been with us for decades, which is how do you ensure that everybody has access to affordable health care? The answer is nothing on that from the legislature. Last session, there was some legislation on the surprise billing, trying to make the system a little more transparent in healthcare billing. Those bills got mixed reviews. My understanding is that federal legislation has since preempted most of the state legislation on surprise billing. And so I think there might have been a bill moving that was just getting our stuff to conform to the federal statutes now. But there is no one in the majority that I'm aware of that's talking about issues of expanding accessibility to healthcare. I mean, the 2.0 program is there. That was driven by Obamacare, and that is pretty much it. So I think that for people looking for real healthcare reform, your only hope's going to be on the federal level.
Okay, thank you. I understand we have another question from the floor.
Yes, Sherry Frank, would you unmute and ask your question, please?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much to Anne and Mary and Ralph for managing this and sharing with Brown County. I want to ask a question about, and thank you so much, Shelley Yoder and Matt Pierce, for being here. A question, I just read an article, I think it was published in December, from Indy Star about nonprofit hospital CEOs' salary being hidden from view, and that obviously is a contradiction to all other public salaries and public information. And apparently the unintended consequence has been that nonprofit hospitals are buying nursing homes and redirecting money to hospitals, leaving nursing homes underfunded, and it's exacerbated the COVID impact and death. And I just was wondering if this is on the radar at all to fix that issue.
Okay, thank you. Representative Pierce?
Well, as you might know, there have been, I think, Professor Hicks at Ball State did a report, and there have been some other reports that suggest that the nonprofit hospitals are actually sitting on big piles of money and are operating more like for-profits. And of course, the nonprofit, the State Hospital Association really objected to that and claimed it was flawed methodology. So I don't know who's going to win that battle over what the facts are, but I think for a while, there was a little bit of focus on, okay, what exactly is going on with these hospitals? How are they billing? Are they struggling to get by, which is the sense you get for rural hospitals, particularly during the pandemic when they had to have their elective surgery shut down. So it's kind of an odd situation where on one hand, you hear from the hospitals, we're struggling to get by, and we really need higher Medicaid reimbursements, and that's kind of the mantra here from the hospitals. And then you have these objective reports that claim, in fact, they're kind of rolling in the money and anti-competitive, that they have no real competition because there's been so much consolidation in the healthcare industry. And so there was some focus, I think, on that over the summer and some of the summer study committees that look at health issues, but I have not seen any legislation at all that looked at any way in which, the financing of hospitals in the state, or, how they might conduct themselves. Because as you know, open records laws that require transparency, they only apply to the government. They don't apply to nonprofits or private entities.
Thank you. Senator Yoder?
Thank you, Sherry, for your question. I have not seen any legislation this session addressing that. And I know that we've been focused somewhat in trying to figure out how to reduce costs, whether it's reduce costs of pharmaceuticals, reduce cost of or transparency and what things cost. But addressing this concern that you are speaking to, nothing was filed, or we didn't hear anything as well to address it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions?
Yes, the next question is from Ann Bright. Oh, I'm sorry, she just finished. The next question is from Charlotte Zedlow.
I'm sorry, I did not just finish.
I'm sorry. You had opened up your video, and I thought that meant you had asked a question. I'm sorry. Ann, please ask your question.
Okay, Matt and Shelley, thank you so much for your responses. My question really, I would like to address to Peggy Mayfield, because this concerns her bill that she sponsored, House Bill 1577. Shelley was talking about telemedicine and expanding it. This is a bill now in the Senate that further restricts and denies women's intelligence by putting barriers up against legal abortion. And the part of the bill that I will ask you all about is the one that concerns early prescriptions for Medicaid abortions. The bill requires a woman to take the first pill in front of a doctor, standing in front of a doctor. It also denies any doctor being able to prescribe that pill through telemedicine. Matt, I wish I were in your district. And Shelley, I appreciate the thought that you give in this issue. So I don't like to put you all on the spot, but if you'd like to comment, I would appreciate it.
Thank you. Senator Yoder, would you like to respond?
I really appreciate you bringing this up again, because I share your deep concern about this. And the bill actually has language that goes even further, that builds on something that was passed last year. And that says, not only does a minor have to get permission from a parent, but now it needs to be notarized. And so in addition to what you already mentioned, and the language of this bill also expands that kind of invasion in someone's privacy and discounting a woman's intelligence and right to sort through these very painful times in her life that I don't deserve to know about, neither does a notary public deserve to know about. And so I share your concern. And one of the things I'm concerned about is if telehealth does make it through, that they'll combine all of these bills into one, and it will be in there. And at that point, that would be, I think, would be a sad day for Indiana, but I'll be making sure that I'm doing all that I can to keep that language out, and that bill does not advance in the Senate.
Thank you. Representative Pierce?
Well, I voted against that bill because it's another in a long line of bills we've been getting over the last decade or so, which we all know, even though they're couched in terms of ensuring patients receive, high quality care, or that there's full understanding of the patients about the procedures they're electing to have. In reality, we know it's just about putting undue burdens on constitutional right, which the courts have given. And so all these things are just to kind of drive up the cost a little bit more, make it a little bit farther away to get the services you need, just kind of slowly strangle the whole system so it can't function. That's really what this is all about. And that's I oppose that because I support the constitutional right of women to decide her own reproductive health decisions. So, this is nothing new. Most of the time they're overturned by the courts. Now, the interesting thing is there's a segment now of the House Republican caucus who feels that bills like this one are just way too timid and don't go far enough. And they're really attacking their own members, claiming they're really not true pro-life members because they're not passing a bill to just outright make it illegal, make it a crime. They really want to roll it back into the 1950s, and they feel that they can do that because they think that Trump appointments to the court will give, all they need is the perfect test case to arrive there, and Roe v. Wade will be overturned, and then the legislature will be free to do whatever it wants. And so the bill's kind of designed to just slowly make it more and more difficult to exercise your constitutional rights. That's kind of considered timid by a number of people in the House now. And so the question is if and when, that might break the other way and finally you see just an outright ban come before the House. Who knows? Okay,
thank you. Do we have more questions from the floor?
As I foreshadowed, Charlotte Zitlow has a question. Charlotte, you'd ask?
Yeah.
Thanks. So you do need to unmute.
Did I do it?
Yes.
Okay. This is sort of it's an obvious follow-up question, but has there been any legislation to support and help people with unintended pregnancies, especially young people, or to take care of the children that are the result of unintended pregnancies? Any support for that?
Thank you. Representative Pierce?
Yeah, Charlotte, this is the irony we've been living with forever. So I mentioned that in the budget, there's no money for doulas, right? So this is a program where you would have people that would kind of assist pregnant women, make sure they have the information they need, they understand the way to have the healthiest pregnancy, and then also help them in the, through the childbirth process, and then ensuring that the child gets off to a good, healthy start, as well as the mother. $0 for that. The other thing we've talked about a lot of times too is, if we really had better sex education in our schools and better access to contraceptives, we could probably significantly reduce people who feel the need to seek an abortion. And in fact, I've made this speech in the floor of the House a couple times in my career. I've essentially said, look, you got two polar opposites on this issue. Each side is not going to convince each other to change their position, but there's plenty of middle ground on things that both sides that could support that would be good for women in general and would have the effect of lowering the number of abortions. And that is things like, access to birth control, good education, and a real support mechanism for the mother and the child, not only during pregnancy and through childbirth, but then after the child is actually born. And, you just look at pre-K. That was the thing on my list, pre-kindergarten. Same funding this year as before. We were told we had to have a pilot, then we'd have some early childhood education, but, out of sight, out of mind. And so that is the ultimate irony. If, Representative Mayfield said during the debate that making sure the woman sees the ultrasound of the fetus is going to be the greatest way to get them to change their mind about having an abortion. Well, I think maybe another great way to change their mind about that is to create programs where they would know they would have some support and not be completely on their own. And that would include things like early childhood education, which would also help the child succeed in life. So, extremely frustrating that we don't have a broader approach to the whole issue.
Thank you. Senator Yoder?
Thank you, Charlotte. I would say one of the bills that I filed was a child care tax credit, and we didn't even get to hear that bill. So no help there. We couldn't get good pregnancy protections. The opportunity to support the doula program in
Prenatal
Indiana
care.
is very frustrating. We did increase TANF. Well, that's at least go from the Senate, it's going over to the House. That is getting funding to low-income families, and that's a plus. But we didn't see an increase in earned income tax credits for individuals, and all of these could really help all Hoosiers, especially those who are looking at struggling and making ends meet and wondering how they're going to provide a good thriving and flourishing life for a young person. So
I just want to thank you and Matt for doing the best you can under really unbelievably difficult circumstances. Thank you both very much for that. What can we do about wetlands?
Hold on just a moment, please, Charlotte. Do we have any other questions?
We're in
Ralph?
people asking second questions now. Charlotte, I can add you to that list. And our next question is from Sherry Frank.
Hi again, thank you. Kind of goes along with what you're talking about, but when I look at the list of bills in both houses, it's overwhelming to me. And there are multiple bills on the same topic. And the question that keeps coming to my mind is kind of what you're getting at with the whole conundrum with abortion versus sex education and support and access to birth control. But is there any hope of ever getting a requirement or expectation that bills be analyzed for their impact on the state?
Thank you. Senator Yoder?
Well, I appreciate that question. We have a department, the Legislative Service, the LSA department, one more acronym. I mean, it's been just drinking from the fire hose when it comes to learning acronyms, but this agency helps legislators craft and sort out language and also try to see the impact that the bill might have in Indiana, but nothing too substantive. It's pretty surface, and so I that would be nice. Although my fear would be something like that would only be used to harm and to silence some people's voices in Indiana, looking at if there was some kind of a board or commission or agency that looked at some of the legislation that legislators put forth, it could be used against some legislators. So, I think that's kind of an interesting idea, but I have not heard about anything quite extensive like that. But I'll be curious to hear what Representative Pierce has to say, because he certainly has been there much longer than I have.
Thank you. Representative Pierce?
There is a requirement that every bill have a fiscal impact statement that is supposed to assess how much it might cost the state treasury if the bill were enacted, but not broader impacts. That is part of the issue in legislating, is trying to discern exactly what are the facts, does a problem exist, what is the problem, how is the solution, how will the solution play out, what are the unintended consequences, and obviously, depending upon one's political viewpoints, people come to different conclusions on that. And so really the information that legislators end up kind of using comes from lobbyists, from people in the hallway, or perhaps people who take the time to come and testify in committee. But we don't really have a system like Congress. I worked for a while for a member of Congress, so I got to see how that system worked out there. And it's a much slower, more frustrating process. But on one hand, they have professional staffs in all these committees who somewhat become experts in different areas. and they kind of filter through all the information that comes from these lobbyists, and they kind of have the function of sorting out the BS from the good information and helping the members figure out what to do, and then, you know, having enough understanding of what they're legislating that they can avoid some of the unintended consequences. Well, in our citizen legislature, there's no committee staff. You have an LSA person that helps you draft bills, and they're overworked. I'm amazed at the amount of stuff they can get done. But you don't really have a set of go-to people that really are dedicated to one particular set of issues on one committee that can help you sort that out. So in the state legislature, you pretty much just, you know, process what you hear from your constituents, what the lobbyists out in the hallway are claiming is going on with the bill. And, you know, I like to try to do, when I have time, some of my own independent research, go out, you know, luckily in the world of Google, you can go out and find some information on these topics to help you make decisions, but it's a challenge.
Thank you. Do we have another question?
Yes. The next question is from Mary Morgan.
Hi, could you talk a little bit about how topics for summer study sessions get decided? I'm particularly interested in whether the topic of the state's housing crisis is being considered. Thanks.
Representative Pierce, would you like to respond?
Yeah, this is a total insider's game, these study committees. So there are a bunch of different ways that you can end up with a study committee. The interesting thing that people don't understand is sometimes we pass a bill that appears to mandate a study committee. But if you actually read the language of the bill, it just says the legislative services or the legislative council, which is essentially the leadership of the House and the Senate, is urged to assign the following topic to a study committee or to create a committee to look at this topic. And it's just a suggestion. And so what you have, the first step is you have to get your topic idea in the suggestion box. And so you could do that by passing a bill all the way through the process and getting the governor to sign it. But that really doesn't give you any more of a leg up than if you just wrote on a cocktail napkin, I want a study committee on this, and handed it to the Speaker of the House, because they just make a giant list of all the topics that people want. So a lot of people write letters saying, please study this topic. Then the leaders of the 4 leaders of the caucus, they vote on which topics they think ought to be actually studied during the session. And then obviously you have to get a majority vote there for that to happen. So there's a lot of stuff that goes on kind of behind the scenes you don't see as they're kind of, negotiating that out, what's going to get heard. The other interesting thing is Speaker Bosma, when he was around several years ago, completely overhauled the summer study committee system. And one thing he did, I thought was really curious, is he completely cut off the ability of a chair of a study committee to actually investigate topics that that chair would like to be involved in. So for example, when I was the chair of the interim study committee on elections way back, in the dark ages, like in 2006 or something, I wanted to study campaign finance reform. So I just did it. And I worked with Common Cause. We brought in experts from Maine and Arizona, and we had a really great discussion about how you might reform the campaign finance system. Well, under the new system now, I would have to go back to Legislative Council and get their blessing to add that topic. Whereas before, the chairs had the ability to add things that they were interested in and kind of better manage their committees. But what that really means is the leadership of the House and the Senate really want to clamp down and control what gets studied during the summer. So you gotta get through the leadership is the short answer.
Thank you. Senator Yoder.
I'll just add that I met with the Monroe County Commission on Affordable Housing, and I'm working with them on some language for a resolution. And as Matt said, it probably doesn't stand a chance, but we're going to at least try and get some study session during the interim to look at this. I had a good conversation with Senator Mishler. He shares some of our concerns up. He represents the Warsaw area, and they have, they're smaller, but they have similar concerns, and I'm hopeful. At least we'll have something, a resolution to look at this. But that's what I'm going to try to do, and hopefully it will get some attention this summer.
Thank you. Do we have another question?
The next question is from Jim and Tommy Allison.
Okay. I drive an electric car, which incurs an electric registration surtax every year of several $100s. And that's fair enough because I don't pay any gasoline tax. But shouldn't internal combustion engines incur an air pollution tax? Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Yoder, would you like to respond?
I would agree. And I think we're seeing some warming to the idea of carbon neutrality. When I was elected this year, I needed to look at how I was going to get back and forth to the State House pretty much every single day and purchased a Chevrolet Bolt. And it's just been fantastic. But I will tell you, I was shocked when I had to buy the tag for that because it was quite expensive. But yes, I think what I am hearing, so this past Thursday in the Utilities Committee, we didn't hear any bills, but we had about an hour and a half, hour and 45-minute discussion on lessons from Texas, looking at what we can learn from what Texas experienced during that really climate crisis-driven weather pattern that they saw a few weeks ago and how it shut down so much of their energy grid throughout Texas. And we were looking at where is Indiana? What do we need to do? Are we setting ourselves up for success in one of these 1 in every 10 years kinds of climate catastrophes? And from that conversation, I did glean that there was a warming to this idea of carbon neutrality coming from our utilities companies, and that they were driving the conversation, that they were saying it's more affordable for renewables. And, it was coming from them that they are reducing and closing much of the coal plants that drive over 50% still of Indiana's energy makeup. And that to me was a big takeaway, that I was listening to some hopeful conversations and making sure that we're doing all that we can. But still, we have a long way to go. We have a long way to go when it comes to making steps in Indiana. And I don't think we're moving quickly enough.
Thank you. Representative Pierce?
Well, Jim, if you want to make a legislator's eye roll really fast, you just start talking about external costs. They really hate talking about external costs, particularly what economists call negative externalities. And in the context of coal, you have to look at what are those external costs, and it would be the same thing with all the fossil fuels. There are external costs which have not been until recently anyway really discussed or kind of assigned to these different forms of energy. It's almost a hostility. It's interesting because I've complained about a bill which is now over in the Senate, which would tell universities that they can't choose zero carbon energy. They wouldn't be able to choose electric vehicles. They wouldn't be able to choose energy efficient building materials for their projects unless they could show that there is a payback within 10 years. And it has to be some external expert has to certify that. And the interesting thing is in that bill, it specifically says in a couple places, you are not allowed to consider external costs because they know they'll lose on external costs. So they don't want them considered. So that's kind of where we are on that.
Thank you. Do we have other questions?
Yes. The next question is from Charlotte Zitlow.
Jesus.
Yes. It's about wetlands.
Yeah, Charlotte sent her questions about the Wetlands Bill. It's getting a lot of attention. So
is that your question, Charlotte?
Charlotte's muted still.
Charlotte, oh, there you go. Charlotte, you should be on now.
Okay, excuse me, I'm sorry.
Sure.
My eyes aren't very good. There's no excuse. So my question is, Monroe County, of course, has got Lake Monroe, and that's a major source of water for our entire region, and one of the biggest sources of clean water in the state and we've got to protect it. And I know letting wetlands be unprotected, makes no sense whatsoever in continuing to protect our water system. So I wonder why we continue to let it go.
Thank you. Representative Pierce?
Yeah, actually, speaking of Lake Monroe, I should have mentioned also in 1337, Representative Ellington had an amendment put into that bill that will essentially wipe out the forestry logging provisions that are in Monroe County ordinance.
Yes.
Designed to protect Lake Monroe from erosion on steep slopes and other kinds of things.
Right.
An ordinance was already severely restricted way back in, I think, 2005. So that's going to be pending over in the Senate, and I'm hoping that maybe that will get removed. But that's one issue. And then on wetlands in general, it's interesting because the proponents of the Wetlands Bill claim that it's really just because the horribly overreaching, totally overregulated, pro-environmental Indiana Department of Environmental Management is harassing too many farmers about wet spots in their fields, which seems like hard to believe. First of all, IDEM was created in Indiana to protect the polluters from the EPA. That's the reason why IDEM exists. It doesn't exist to actually protect the environment. It exists to protect the polluters from more strenuous regulation on the federal level, because if the state does not itself implement these regulations, then the feds get to do it. And so I find it hard to believe that, IDEM under these Republican governors who pride themselves on less regulation and pro-business environment and all that kind of good stuff are actually, having an over-officious IDEM. But that's essentially the argument. And so, as we know, the wetlands have great environmental benefits as far as, clean water, flooding, all kinds of things. And so it makes sense to protect those. And I think I've been hearing a little bit that perhaps maybe the House, key House people are a little more skeptical about that bill. So I'm hoping that maybe it'll at least get severely overhauled so it's not nearly as damaging as it is now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Yoder?
Thank you, Charlotte. One of the curious things about this bill is on, I don't know if it was a Wednesday, we actually passed this legislation through the Senate to deregulate the remaining isolated wetlands in Indiana. And the author of that bill was very forthright to make sure that he continued to repeat that this in no way affects Indiana's drinking water, which is wrong and not the case at all when you understand the role that our wetlands play in managing flooding, in managing the quality of our drinking water, that they play an important role in the ecosystem. So that happened on one day, and the next day we pass one of the co-authors of the wetland deregulating the wetlands was the author of a wastewater task force that's now going over to this House to create a task force to look at the problem in Indiana of how we're going to deal with Indiana's wastewater, which is ironic because the wetlands help us deal with wastewater. So I'm hopeful because I am hearing that that bill for deregulating Indiana's remaining isolated wetlands may look very different on the other end of this, but please, everybody, if you care about this, keep looking at that bill, watch it move through the House, and hopefully we can kill it.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Do we have more questions?
We have one from Georgianne.
Sorry, this is just a quick question for clarification. Representative Pierce, you were just talking about a bill that affected the universities and their ability to do carbon, I think you said carbon neutral. Can you give the number of that bill? Do you know it off the top of your head? There's so many, sometimes it's hard to go searching.
I want to say 1191, but I think that might not be right. It's Representative Pressel is the House author, and maybe if I can get into legislations by legislator, I'll be able to find it here since my trusty computer is in front of me. And but yeah, that was an amendment. So originally that bill was about preempting local units of government from mandating that new subdivisions had to use electric energy instead of natural gas. And then out of nowhere, apparently from the Speaker's office, this amendment related to universities got put in there. So it's kind of an afterthought. And then it expanded even further along those lines into local units. So it's a pretty crazy bill right now. And so we'll have to, hopefully I will find that before we get done here, and I'll give you that number.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you.
And it is 1191. That's my contribution. I looked it up for you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any more questions?
We have one more. This is from Carrie Mixa. And I just let her know that she's next, but Carrie.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, you got my name right. Thank you. My question is about House Bill 1005. I am chair of the Indiana Coalition for Public Education in Monroe County. Side note, we did just release a documentary called Indiana's Choice, and Representative Pierce is featured in that documentary. And we're very proud for him to be in that. But I'm wondering the status of HB 1005 in regards to educational savings accounts now that it's on the Senate side. Is the Senate feeling any kind of pressure in regards to that part of the bill? And the sister bill, the Senate bill, the one that remains, I can't remember if it's 412 or 413. What's the chance of educational savings account language popping up in there in an amendment during that hearing? That's my question.
Okay, thank you. Representative Pierce, would you like to address that first, and then we'll conclude our session with Senator Yoder?
I can't begin to guess what the Senate might do, but I can just tell you, I think the odds of passing are pretty high because this is a core ideological belief of the Republicans, and there's a lot of dark money floating around from people who benefit when you have vouchers and money flowing to private schools and charter schools, because you have a lot of these things set up as nonprofits, and then they subcontract out to for-profit companies to operation of the school or key services. So there's lots of money to be made there. So there's kind of a weird dark money thing going on in the background. But you know, I'm from having talked to enough Republicans, I think that they really feel that we should just have a system where you give a bag of money to the parents and you let them decide where they want to spend it for education, that you don't actually fund a school system, a school corporation, or have, quote, government schools. And instead, what you do is you just give the money directly to the parents. They decide what school they like best. And this is this Milton Friedman idea of competition that will force all the bad schools to get better. And you know, the bad schools would be forced out of the system. And that's what they're kind of moving toward. Now, I think they recognize that if they just stood up on day one and said, well, we want to eliminate public school funding and have a system where the parents just decide where to spend the money, and if that's a private or religious school, fine by us, they have to be incremental about it. And so they've been slowly expanding it. And this is just the next step in the incremental expansion. So I would expect that it's going to happen, because the other thing is, the Republicans in the House anyway, I think the Senate started copying this, but the Republicans in the House love to have their official agenda of items to accomplish in the legislative session. And the bills that relate to those agenda items are the first 10 bills introduced. So if you see a bill with a number from 1001 through 1010, those are the chosen ones that are key Republican caucus bills. And because that's 1005, that makes me think that, you know, this is on their checklist to get done this session. And so I expect they will get it done.
Okay, thank you. Senator Yoder.
Thank you, Carrie. I appreciate this question. I do not appreciate House Bill 1005 or House Bill 412, which died in committee, but 413, it had headed over to the House. I certainly don't feel pressure to support it. It's a terrible bill. When we see that 90% of our children in Indiana attend traditional public schools and the funding does not reflect that, this price tag on 1005 is in the upper, I think they've even reduced it, but now it's about $80 million, looking at these education savings accounts and expanding vouchers. When we're not even having conversations about teacher pay, or we're not having conversations about really how we're going to address any of the learning loss that our students have experienced over the last 18 months, 12 months. In addition to that, the impact of mental illness on our children and trauma-informed care, it is irresponsible. And I agree with Senator Pierce. Sadly, it will probably pass, and it will not impact the majority, positively impact the majority of our children in Indiana. That money and that program will go to support 10% of Indiana's children. So it is really unfortunate, but I do not support it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's time for us to conclude today's legislative update. Our next update will be Saturday, April 10th. You can follow the work of the Indiana General Assembly on their website, which is iga.in.gov, which provides a wealth of information and allows you to track the progress of individual bills. You can also follow their work through the Bloomington Herald-Times and other local media. And as I mentioned earlier, everyone who registered will receive a follow-up email that has information on the upcoming March 10th citizens group getting together to talk about redistricting and other information. In closing, I would like to thank Ralph Shaw for making the arrangements for this program and also the other league members who assisted. And be sure to check the CAT's schedule for any rebroadcast of this session. And of course, finally, thanks to our legislators for being here to share current legislative session information with us. And thanks to all of you for attending. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.